There is a wall of fire at the edge of our solar system. NASA confirmed it with a spacecraft that has been flying for nearly 50 years. Voyager 1 hit that wall, crossed it, and kept going. And what it found on the other side changed how we understand our place in the galaxy. This is not a metaphor. This is a measured fact, buried in data sent home from a machine built in the 1970s. You have probably heard the name. Voyager 1, the little probe that left Earth in 1977 and never looked back. But what most people do not know is that its final act was the strangest one of all. It reached the boundary where our sun's power finally runs out, and the instruments on board recorded something that sounded like fire, something that made scientists argue for months about what they were actually seeing. By the end of this video, you will understand why researchers called that boundary a wall of fire, why the crossing took so long to confirm, and why the signal that proved it was hiding in data nobody expected to find. This is the story of the most distant human-made object in existence, the wall it walked through, and the quiet, unsettling discovery waiting on the other side. Because here's the part that stops people cold. The wall of fire is real. The heat is real. And yet, if you had been standing there, you would have felt absolutely nothing. A fire that cannot burn. A wall that cannot stop you. A boundary that is both terrifying and completely harmless. That contradiction is the mystery, and Voyager 1 is the only witness we have ever sent to see it up close. Let us go back to the beginning. September 1977. A rocket lifts off from Cape Canaveral carrying a small spacecraft built to outlast everyone who built it. The engineers who signed off on that launch had no idea what they were really sending out there. They thought they were launching a planetary probe. They were actually launching a monument. Voyager 1 was not designed to reach the edge of space. It was designed to visit two planets, Jupiter, Saturn. A quick flyby mission that would take a few years and then quietly drift away into the dark. That was the plan. That was the whole plan. And for a while, everything went exactly the way the mission planners drew it up. But gravity had other ideas. The spacecraft used Jupiter and Saturn like slingshots, gaining speed with every pass. Each swing pushed it faster, farther deeper into the black. By the time it finished its planetary work, Voyager 1 was moving faster than any human-made object had ever moved, and it was pointed straight out of the solar system. Nobody gave it a new mission at first. It just kept flying. The team at NASA watched it drift, and slowly they realized what they had on their hands. A one-way ticket to interstellar space, a machine with no return address, a message in a bottle aimed at the stars. On board was a golden record, a message for anyone or anything that might find it. Greetings in 55 languages, music, the sounds of Earth, whales singing, thunder, a heartbeat, a bottle thrown into a cosmic ocean that might never be opened by anyone at all. It carried cameras that would eventually be turned off to save power. It carried instruments that would keep working for decades. And it carried something else, a quiet promise to keep sending data home as long as it could, as long as the nuclear heart inside it kept beating. For years, Voyager 1 did its job. It sent back images of Jupiter's storms, Saturn's rings, moons no human eye had ever seen. Then the planets shrank behind it, and the real journey began. The part nobody had planned for, the part that would make history. The spacecraft left the known neighborhood. It passed the orbit of Neptune. It passed the orbit of Pluto. And still, it kept going into a region of space so empty that the nearest star is trillions of miles away. A place where the sun looks like just another star. A place where home becomes a memory. Here is where most people lose track of the story. Because the solar system does not end where the planets end. The sun's influence reaches much, much farther than anyone used to think. And that hidden reach is exactly what Voyager 1 was about to discover the hard way. The sun does not just give light and heat. It also blows a wind. A constant stream of charged particles racing outward in every direction at over 1 million miles per hour. That wind is invisible. It is silent. But it is real, and it is powerful, and it shapes everything it touches. That wind carves a bubble around the entire solar system. A giant sphere of solar influence called the Heliosphere. Inside that bubble, the sun rules. Outside that bubble, the galaxy takes over. And Voyager 1 was heading straight for the line between those two worlds. Scientists had argued about that line for decades. Some thought it would be a clean boundary, a sharp edge where the sun's wind simply stops and interstellar space begins, a tidy line in the dark that a spacecraft could cross in a single moment. Others thought it would be violent, a place where two opposing forces slam into each other, a cosmic collision zone hiding at the edge of everything we call home, a region where the solar wind and the galaxy fight for control of the space between them. Nobody could test it. No spacecraft had ever gone that far. The edge of the Heliosphere was a theory written on paper, not a place anyone had ever seen. It existed only in equations and arguments, until the day Voyager 1 got close enough to see for itself. And the first thing it found was not a line. It was a wall of heated, compressed, churning plasma. A wall that had been hiding at the edge of our cosmic home the entire time. waiting for the first visitor to stumble into it. In December 2004, Voyager 1 crossed something no spacecraft had ever crossed before, the Termination Shock, the place where the solar wind finally slows down, the place where the sun's breath stops pushing and the galaxy starts pushing back. Here's what happens at that boundary. The solar wind is moving at supersonic speed, then it hits the interstellar medium, the thin gas between the stars, and it slams to a stop. Imagine a river hitting a dam. That is what happens to the solar wind at the edge of the bubble. When a supersonic wind suddenly slows down, something dramatic happens. The energy has to go somewhere, and it goes into heat. The particles in that region get heated to extreme temperatures, temperatures that shocked the scientists who first saw the numbers. This is the wall of fire. Not fire in the way you think, not flames, not something you could see burning, but a region where the plasma is heated so violently that the temperatures reach hundreds of thousands of degrees, hotter than the surface of the sun itself. Imagine standing at a boundary where the gas around you suddenly heats up to hotter than the surface of a star. That is what Voyager 1 flew through. That is the wall of fire. And it is 100% real, measured by instruments, confirmed by NASA, and still misunderstood by almost everyone. But here's the twist that makes the whole thing strange. The density is almost nothing. A few particles per cubic centimeter. So little material that a spacecraft would pass through the wall of fire without ever getting warm, without ever even noticing the heat. The fire is real. The heat is real. But it is heat in a near-perfect vacuum. You could fly through it and feel nothing. You could hold out your hand and feel nothing. And that contradiction is exactly what confused scientists for years after the crossing. Voyager 1 did not just pass through the wall, it recorded it. The instruments on board measured the heating, the slowing, the chaos of that boundary. And the data did not look like anything the models predicted. The wall was messier than anyone imagined. The crossing was not clean. The spacecraft bounced through the boundary region for months, in and out, as if the wall itself was breathing. As if the edge of the solar system was alive, pulsing, shifting under the pressure of two forces that refused to settle. Scientists called it a turbulent mess. The termination shock was not a smooth surface. It was a churning, unstable region where the solar wind fought the interstellar medium in a battle that never quite ended. And Voyager 1 was caught in the middle of that fight. And that was only the first wall. Because beyond the termination shock, there was another boundary. A final one, the place where the sun's influence ends completely, the heliopause. The true edge of the solar system, the last frontier of our sun's reach. The heliopause is the edge of everything we call home. Beyond it, the sun is just another star in the sky. Beyond it, the galaxy begins. And Voyager 1 was approaching that line at a speed of about 1 million miles a day, closing in on the moment that would change everything. For years, the spacecraft kept sending data from inside the Heliosphere. The instruments kept working. The power kept flowing. And the team on Earth kept watching the numbers climb, kept waiting, kept wondering when the boundary would finally arrive. Then, in 2012, the numbers started doing something impossible. The readings from Voyager 1 began changing in ways that did not match anything inside the Heliosphere. Something was different. Something had shifted. And nobody on Earth knew exactly what it meant yet. The cosmic ray counts jumped. High-energy particles from deep space started flooding in. The kind of particles that only exist outside the sun's protective bubble. The kind of particles that the heliosphere normally blocks. And suddenly, they were everywhere. At the same time, the solar particles started dropping. The wind from the sun was fading. The instruments were catching the very first hints that Voyager 1 had reached the edge, that it was standing at the threshold of interstellar space, that the wall was right in front of it. But NASA did not announce it. Not yet. Because the data was confusing. One instrument said interstellar space, another instrument said something else, and the team could not agree on what they were seeing. The most important moment in the mission's history was also its most confusing. This is where the story gets its tension, because for months the most famous spacecraft in history was sitting at the edge of the solar system, and nobody could prove it had crossed. The evidence was there, but it was incomplete, and incomplete evidence is not proof. The problem was the plasma instrument, the one tool that could directly measure the density of the gas around the spacecraft, the one instrument that could settle the argument in a single reading. And it had stopped working years earlier, broken, dead, useless. Without that instrument, the team had to find another way to prove they had crossed the boundary. They had to get creative. They had to dig through decades-old data and find a signal that nobody had thought to look for. And that is when the mystery really began. Here's the thing about Voyager 1. It was built in the 1970s. Its instruments are ancient by modern standards. But one of them, the plasma wave system, was about to deliver the discovery of a lifetime. A discovery hiding in a sound. The plasma wave instrument listens. It detects vibrations in the thin gas around the spacecraft. It hears the plasma the way an ear hears the air. And in the spring of 2013, it caught a sound that changed everything. A sound that had been waiting in the data all along. It was a whistle, a rising tone in the readings, a signal that only happens when the plasma around the spacecraft is dense enough to ring like a bell. And that whistle meant one thing. The spacecraft was surrounded by plasma that could not exist inside the heliosphere. And that whistle was the proof. It showed that Voyager 1 was surrounded by plasma denser than anything inside the sun's bubble. Plasma that could only exist in interstellar space. Plasma from the galaxy itself. The wall of fire was behind the spacecraft, and the whistle proved it. On September 12, 2013, NASA made the announcement. Voyager 1 had left the solar system. It had crossed the Heliopause. It was the first human-made object to reach interstellar space, the first artifact of our species to step beyond the sun's reach. And the world barely noticed. Think about what that means. A machine built in the 1970s, powered by nuclear decay, flying for 36 years, had crossed the boundary that defines our place in the galaxy. A boundary no other object had ever touched. A boundary that had existed for 4.5 billion years without a single witness. The wall of fire was behind it, the solar wind was behind it, and ahead of it was the space between the stars, a place no human-made object had ever been, a place that had only ever been imagined. And Voyager 1 was there, sending home measurements of a brand new world. But here's what makes the story strange. The crossing did not happen the way scientists expected. The boundary was not where the models said it would be. The wall was not shaped the way the equations predicted. And every surprise raised more questions than it answered. Voyager 1 crossed the heliopause at about 121 astronomical units from the Sun. 1 astronomical unit is the distance from Earth to the Sun, so the spacecraft crossed at 121 times that distance, roughly 11 billion miles from home, a number that surprised everyone. The models had predicted the crossing would happen at a different distance. Some said closer, some said farther. Nobody got it exactly right. And that alone told scientists that their picture of the solar system's edge was incomplete. The wall was not where they thought it was. More than that, the crossing happened without a bow shock. For years, scientists expected the heliosphere to push through interstellar space like a boat through water, creating a shock wave at the front, a dramatic wave of compressed gas leading the way through the galaxy. The data showed something different. The heliosphere seemed to be moving through the galaxy without that dramatic shock, as if the boundary was gentler than anyone imagined, as if the wall of fire was not crashing through space but drifting through it, quietly, silently. And then there was the magnetic highway. In the months before the crossing, Voyager 1 entered a strange region where the sun's magnetic field lines connected directly to interstellar space, a region that had never been predicted, a region that had no name until Voyager 1 found it. Particles were flowing out along those lines, and interstellar particles were flowing in. A two-way street at the edge of the solar system that nobody had ever imagined. A highway of magnetic fields linking our sun to the galaxy itself, and Voyager 1 was driving straight down it. Scientists called it the magnetic highway, and it was the strangest region Voyager 1 had ever flown through, a place where the solar system and the galaxy were literally touching, a place where the wall of fire opened up and let the universe in. That region is part of why the confirmation took so long. The spacecraft seemed to be in interstellar space, but it was still feeling the sun's magnetic field, and that confused the team for months. They could not tell if the spacecraft had crossed or was still standing at the door. Remember the wall of fire we talked about at the start? Here's where it gets even stranger. The wall is not just one boundary. It is a whole region of chaos, a layered living structure built from the Termination Shock, the Heliopause, and the magnetic highway all stacked together. The Termination Shock, the Heliopause, the magnetic highway, the bow shock that was not there. The edge of the solar system turned out to be a layered, messy living structure. Not a line, not a wall, a whole landscape of boundaries, each one stranger than the last. And Voyager 1 was the first thing to touch it. The first witness to the place where our sun's power finally dies out and the galaxy takes over. The first machine to feel the wall of fire and live to tell the story. And the story it told changed everything. This matters far beyond one spacecraft. Because the heliosphere is a shield. It protects the inner solar system from galactic cosmic rays, the high-energy particles that rain down from exploding stars across the galaxy. The wall of fire is part of that shield, part of our protection. That shield shapes life on Earth. It shapes our atmosphere. It shapes the very conditions that allowed life to survive here for billions of years. Without the heliosphere, the surface of our planet would be a very different place, a harsher place, a place that might never have given birth to us. Understanding the wall of fire is understanding our own protection. It is understanding the bubble that keeps us alive, while the rest of the galaxy is a far more hostile place. It is understanding the invisible armor that has surrounded our world since the sun first ignited. And here's the uncomfortable part. The shield is not permanent. The sun's wind changes over time. The heliosphere shrinks and grows as the sun's activity rises and falls. The wall of fire is not a fixed wall. It is a living boundary that breathes with the sun. If the sun's wind weakens, the bubble shrinks, and more cosmic radiation reaches the inner solar system. The wall moves, the shield thins, and everything inside it feels the difference. Voyager 1 is the first instrument to watch that boundary from the outside. Scientists study this boundary with other missions too. When the IBEX spacecraft maps the edge of the Heliosphere from Earth orbit. New Horizons watches from beyond Pluto, but nothing compares to Voyager 1. Nothing else has crossed the wall. Nothing else is sending data home from the other side. Because Voyager 1 is not looking at the wall from a distance. It is inside the wall. It is past the wall. It is sending data home from the other side of the boundary that defines our cosmic home. It is the only voice we have ever heard from beyond the fire. Every signal it sends takes more than 20 hours to reach Earth. 20 hours at the speed of light. That is how far away the most distant human-made object now is. When you read this, the spacecraft is already somewhere else, already farther, already deeper into the dark. The numbers are almost impossible to picture. Voyager 1 is more than 15 billion miles from Earth. If the sun were the size of a basketball, Voyager 1 would be more than a mile away. A tiny speck of metal and wiring drifting through a void that dwarfs everything we know. And it is still moving, still flying, still sending data. A tiny machine, older than most of the people watching this video, still doing science at the edge of the galaxy, still measuring the wall it crossed, still mapping the space between the stars. But the mission cannot last forever. The spacecraft is powered by radioactive decay, and that power is running out. NASA has been turning off instruments one by one to keep the mission alive, to stretch the last drops of energy, to keep the voice from the edge of the galaxy going. Here's the reveal the hook promised. The wall of fire is real. But it is not what the headlines made it sound like, and the truth is stranger than the clickbait, stranger than the scary thumbnails, stranger than anything the internet guessed when the story first broke. The fire is not fire. It is plasma heated to hundreds of thousands of degrees, but the density is so low that the entire wall contains almost nothing. It is a ghost fire, a phantom heat, a wall of energy with almost no matter inside it at all. Voyager 1 flew through a region hotter than the surface of the sun and felt nothing. Because heat only matters when there is matter to heat, and at the edge of the solar system, there is almost none. A few lonely particles heated to impossible temperatures, spread across an ocean of emptiness. That is the discovery hiding inside the drama. The wall of fire is a paradox, violent in energy, empty in substance, a boundary that is both terrifying and utterly harmless, a fire that cannot burn, a wall that cannot stop you, a gate that opens as easily as it closes. And that paradox changed how scientists think about the edge of the solar system. It is not a solid wall, it is a transition, a slow, layered handover from the sun to the galaxy, a place where one world ends and another begins without any sharp line between them. The real story of Voyager 1 is not a story of fire. It is a story of crossing, of leaving home, of the first object made by human hands to reach the space between the stars. And the fire was just the doorway, just the threshold, just the beginning of the journey. Since the crossing, Voyager 1 has kept sending data from interstellar space. It has measured the density of the gas out there. It has felt the magnetic fields of the galaxy itself. It has tasted the space between the stars and reported back what it found. And the data keeps surprising scientists. The interstellar medium is not uniform. It is clumpy. It is textured. It is full of structure that no one had ever mapped. Voyager 1 is flying through a landscape no one had ever seen, a landscape that exists beyond the wall of fire. In 2018, Voyager 2 crossed the same boundary. A different spacecraft, a different path, and a working plasma instrument. Together, the twins are mapping the edge of the solar system from two sides, two witnesses to the same wall, two voices from beyond the fire. Voyager 2 confirmed what Voyager 1 had found. The wall is real. The crossing is real. And the two spacecraft are giving scientists the first direct look at the boundary of our cosmic home, the first direct measurements of the wall of fire from both sides. But Voyager 1 remains the champion, the farthest, the fastest, the first. And it is still out there, still talking, still crossing the void at 1,000,000 miles a day, still the most distant human-made object in the universe, still carrying our message into the deep. NASA estimates the spacecraft has enough power to keep some instruments running into the 2030s. After that, the science stops. The instruments go dark, and Voyager 1 becomes a silent monument, a quiet artifact drifting through interstellar space without a single working sensor, a monument flying through interstellar space, carrying the golden record, carrying the sounds of Earth, carrying a message from a species that finally reached beyond its own star, a message that will keep traveling long after the machines that sent it have gone silent. This is the part that makes people stop. Because Voyager 1 will outlive us. It will outlive our children. It will keep flying for billions of years long after the sun has changed the Earth beyond recognition, long after everything we have ever built has turned to dust. It will drift through the galaxy, past other stars, past other worlds, a tiny artifact of a civilization that once looked up and decided to go, a civilization that built a machine, pointed it at the stars, and let it fly. And the machine is still flying, and the wall of fire was the last door it walked through, the last boundary of home, the final threshold between everything we know and everything we do not, a threshold that will one day be crossed again, by a different machine, by a different generation, by us. Think about the timing. Voyager 1 was launched in 1977, the same year most of the people watching this video were not even born. And it is still doing science, still making discoveries, still teaching us about the place where our sun's power ends. The engineers who built it are mostly gone. The launch pads have changed. The world has changed. The technology has changed beyond recognition. But the spacecraft keeps going, running on a design that has outlasted every prediction, outlasted every expectation. There is something almost sacred about that. A machine that refuses to stop. A mission that refused to end. A voice at the edge of the galaxy that will not go silent. A whisper from beyond the wall of fire that keeps reaching Earth, hour after hour, year after year. And now, the final piece of the story, the thing that ties it all together. The reason this matters more than a single spacecraft crossing a single boundary. The reason the wall of fire is more than just a scary headline. The wall of fire is not just a wall, it is a definition. It marks the edge of our sun's power, the edge of the place we call home, the edge of the bubble that made life on Earth possible. And Voyager 1 crossed it, and in crossing it, it proved something profound. The little spacecraft proved that the boundary of our world is not a wall at all. It is a door that can be opened, a door that has now been opened. And once a door is opened, it is very hard to close it again. The solar system is no longer a closed room. Every future spacecraft that leaves the solar system will pass through the same wall of fire. Every mission to the stars will cross the same threshold. Voyager 1 showed the way. It marked the path. It proved that the journey is possible, and that changes everything. The fire that headlines made sound so terrifying turned out to be a welcome. A handshake between the sun and the galaxy, a boundary that says, you are leaving home now. Be brave. And Voyager 1 was brave. It crossed the fire, it stepped into the dark, and it kept talking. And that is the quiet truth hiding behind the drama. The wall of fire was never a threat. It was a beginning. The first step of a journey that humanity has only just started. A journey that will one day carry us past the fire, past the stars, into the deep. Remember the whistle we talked about earlier? The signal that proved the crossing? That whistle is still echoing in the data. It is the sound of a machine arriving somewhere new, somewhere no machine had ever arrived before. Somewhere that will one day be the starting point for everything else we send out there. Somewhere that will one day be a highway, a road to the stars, a path that begins at the wall of fire and leads to places we cannot even imagine yet. And it all started with a whistle, a tiny rising tone in the data of a spacecraft built in the 1970s. Voyager 1 is still flying, still sending, still crossing. And somewhere out there, beyond the wall of fire, beyond the reach of our sun, it is carrying a little piece of Earth into the deep, a golden record, a heartbeat, a whisper from home, traveling at 1,000,000 miles a day. The wall is behind it now. The stars are ahead. And the most distant human-made object in the universe is still doing the only thing it was ever built to do. Keep going. Keep listening. Keep sending. Keep crossing the fire that was never meant to stop us, because it never did, and it never will.